fascinated by what how successful Asian games have been in terms of Western markets, but it's not been necessarily the case the other way around for lots of reasons I imagine we might touch on later. But enough of me talking. Aras, over to you.
Hi. Thank you, Oscar. It's great to be here again. Today I'll try to talk about how like this Asian gaming industry, especially on mobile, started to take over the Western part of the world, and like what can we do to, like, as publishers or developers, to better understand and take necessary actions on this. So like when I started, I'd like to talk first about, you know, the global game market. We just try to understand how mobile gaming is becoming number one and gonna be like keep staying number one. As you can see, like today, almost 45% of the whole revenue of the global games market is coming from, you know, tablet and smartphones, basically on mobile devices. And on top of it, we see that it's growing fast, and while the others are like not growing that much, we see mobile growing really fast compared to others. So, and when we see where is this coming from, we see that the Asia Pacific is making almost 50% of the total revenue, and combining, you know, China, where we don't know the, you know, the, for example, the Google revenue, because like it doesn't basically exist, and there's a big Android market over there. We can think that it practically might be much larger, but on top of it, we have Japan, Taiwan, Korea, like these 4 countries leading the gaming industry in mobile, and also like USA and UK and some of the European countries are following strictly behind. It means that this is a huge place to be in terms of, you know, the Asian games becoming really top, becoming in the top charts of the Western market. So, East versus West. This is a great. I think I find this very interesting because Street Fighter has a heritage of like maybe history of 30 years in the coming, and we see this game becoming so particularly important for the gaming industry, because like it started with Ryu and Ken. Ryu is your humble, I mean, like occasionally speaking, you know, this cool guy who represents like Japanese or like Asian culture, and you have Ken, which is like a really on par in terms of ability to Ryu, but like a loudmouth, a family guy, talks a lot, jokes a lot, and so on. So in the beginning of the, you know, gaming industry, the Asian market thought that they need this kind of a stereotype to be attracted to the Western market. And in time, I mean, like there are like millions of Street Fighter games, and today they differ in ability a lot, and Ryu became like the iconic face of the game, and you see that their ability is different. In the beginning, their abilities were exactly the same. Now their abilities is like very different from each other. The moves are different, you know, the kicks are different, and everything is pretty much different. So it's the same as of today, and I want to take you through time to show you what's happened between 2016 till today in terms of like top charts. And you know, in 2016 May, we saw that, you know, the strategy games like kind of took over the Western market, and there weren't many RPG titles back then. And you see that in the Asian market, it's almost 100% more focused on RPG or action RPG or kind of similar games. So when we slowly like move forward, we see that, like, you know, Clash of Clans, Mobile Strike, Game of War, Fire Rage were like on the top charts. Then in 2017, we started to see, you know, the Clash Royale, and you know, games like Gardenscapes, like penetrating the Western charts. Then we see a mixture of, you know, survival games in 2017, 2018. At the same time, we don't see much of a difference in the Asian market. They kept staying on the hardcore RPG games, and the only difference was obviously Arena of Valor, which became like a huge phenomenon in China because like it's particularly managed to bring MOBA genre like League of Legends to the mobile platforms, and it still stays by today #1 in China. So moving forward, we see that obviously in United States we saw like slot games or like gambling, soft gambling games like Slotomania always like being in the top 10 charts. We saw the surge of Fortnite in the West, and we saw the surge of PUBG Mobile on the East, and then today it completely is a different story because in less than a year these charts really shake it off with introduction of Roblox, Fortnite, PUBG Mobile, Brawl Stars, and we see that on the West, Roblox becoming like one of the top games in the West, while there's nothing to be seen in the East. Nobody, obviously it's not in the top 10 in any countries in the East. While in the East we see that still Japan, China, Korea differ from each other, but still very much focused on battleground games like Knives Out or PUBG Mobile or Failure like MOBA, and the rest is ARPG or RPG titles. So you see this is US versus UK top 10. We see this is very similar, means that these cultures are practically moving together in terms of information flow, communication, friendship, and so on. Like people exactly play similar games, and you can see like you see Fortnite there, you see Candy Crush Saga there, you see Roblox there, you see like Homescapes there. These are like very similar. While the Western culture as a whole is very similar to each other, we don't see the same in Asia. You see like Japan, Korea, and China back in 2017 was almost, there was not a single game sharing top spots. Again, look at this like a few months ago, top 10 China, top 10 Japan, there's not a single game in the same chart. So this is a completely different situation there. So this is practically gives Asia a lot of different options, a lot of different games to play with in the Western world. Like almost like 4 or 5 times more games to play compared to West. So one of the major reasons of this, in my opinion, is because of the social media platforms. All we know is like we know YouTube, we have Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Facebook, and to a certain extent, we already know that China, Japan, and Korea, they have their own apps for communication. And while WhatsApp's properties for in-game invites or blogging details is almost non-existent, we see in the WeChat and in Japan in Line or in Korea Kakao Talk, we see all the gaming communities having their own channels on their blogs or their information channels. They talk to each other, they can invite each other through the app. This is like similar to the Facebook's like 2016, 2017 in Facebook, where people could like really invite people to play games from Facebook. But today this is driving a much larger communities in these Asian countries. While, for example, YouTube, China has its own YouTube, has its own Instagram, has its own Facebook, which is not shared by any other country. And for example, Japan is in the middle of it. Like they also use Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, but also they have their own channels. And WhatsApp practically replaced by Line, which gives them in a better communicated community for like especially mobile games. So this is fun, but like this is very important because in games this is like really takes a step forward, in my opinion. As a social norm, female attractiveness in West is looks very wide. Like you have all this type of women that we find attractive, but on the opposite side, when you see Asia, you see all these women, differences in our eyes is so subtle. To the average Westerner, this could practically look like one woman in 25 different outfits or hairstyles, which is not the case. So this is like a hard evidence of, you know, the cultural differences. This is like practically happens a lot of in the games, which I'm going to show you next. And because of this, it's fundamental to understand the basic differences so we can use those differences in our games and at least to a moderate success or like a better success in the future. So I'm going to show you some examples of what is succeeding and why is succeeding. First of all, look at this. This is practically a game that has been launched in the West just by, you know, changing the language to English and putting out there, which failed miserably. We took the same game, combined with Marvel IP, practically the same, you know, game mechanics, almost similar monetization system. Obviously, as you can see, less of a, I mean, lots of less buttons to be play with, to be honest, and you have a hit. So one of the things that is important, while the IPs, you know, anime IPs or other IPs are very important in Asia, in the West, IPs like, you know, Marvel, DC, Disney, or, you know, Simpsons or whatever, that kind of like, you know, Star Wars, practically really make it appealing for the Western audience. So this is one. So, but this is like a big project, of course, like you need a collaboration with a large IP owner, which might not be the case all the time. But this is one of the very important things that created a lot of success for a lot of Asian companies. Another thing is, you know, the product tweaks that has to be happening in the UI UX part. You know, on the left you have the original lobby UI. On the right is the like the tweaked UI. On the left you have almost 65 buttons, some of them hidden. When we tested this, for example, when you this is impossible to be understood by a Westerner, because, you know, we have this practically, we have this, you know, left to right reading, understanding since our childhood. But on the same time, you know, Asians have this kanji culture where every letter has, you know, 4 sides. So they have this whole idea of looking at a picture or looking at a screen and understanding the whole thing from left to right, right to left, up, down, or whatever. So it's important for us to be like from left to right to have the most important buttons on the left and, you know, go to the right as well. So this is a very, very important part. Another thing is, like, you know, in the East, tutorial is a huge part of the process. Almost all Asian people like very familiar with tutorials. They like to read tutorials. They like to read those stuff before trying out product or something like that. But on the West, we really try to jump into the game as soon as possible. So while on the left, the original game has like you actually see the game at the 4th step. We did this in the 2nd step, where you immediately get into the game and win. And then you start to get the tutorial one by one to teach the whole process, but in like a longer period of time instead of giving it all in the beginning. This is like a rule of thumb. This almost always happens for any Asian game. They have to change the tutorial immediately to make it much easier for Westerners. Another thing is, you know, localization. This is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to stay on it because, like, you know, the most of the, I mean, one of the recent successes in the mobile in strategy genres was Rise of Kingdoms, and practically, of course, being a spectacular game, one of the reasons it became so successful, for example, in our region, is because it has Ottoman Empire in it. So everybody has a culture motivation to play the game. This is like something that has to be done, especially in, you know, for example, Middle East has like almost 350 million people, and they have different kind of understanding in many different things. So their culture is, you know, very important as much as Spain or UK or, you know, France. So you have to take care of it as well. Don't forget about different cultures. Uh, Again, this is something funny, but like really tough to understand. Sometimes, the same. I mean, in the West, we really look up to more like real characters in the shooter games or action RPGs. While in Asia, the fairy type, fantasy, illusionary characters are more common and more popular. Where if you like use those characters, these are immediately perceived as a kids game in the West. So you have to change those. Like most of the games, especially in Japan, has this kid characters or like childish looking characters where like when I see those characters, I think that this is not a game for my age, but it's a game for my kid or a 10-year-old. So I think like Asian gaming companies really tackled this well and managed to put like more realistic characters, while the opposite didn't really happen in terms of the character design. But I see this is also improving. Like you can see here the same game, same characters, one for the Eastern, one for the Western audiences. You see like the beard and the long hair and the dark hair, while you have like the fairy skin blonde guy as a main character, which really is not appealing for Western audiences. Autoplay is another thing, which is like really like tackling Western audiences right now. It's been a part of gaming, mobile gaming culture since 2015 in especially China, US. I mean China, Japan, and Taiwan. Also, especially in Korea, you see everywhere, like in Starbucks or in the cafes, like people like putting their phones open and like it's just farming over there. And it's really important to it's really important to understand this. This is like part of the process for them, and we see more games doing the same. While in the West, the control is more important. We see that also in some games, it started to be important as well. This is also important. Like I told you about social platforms, you need to include everything if you want to go West, and the opposite as well. You have to be appealing. Right now, just Facebook is not enough. You need to integrate all this kind of platforms so people can communicate with each other and talk to each other. Because like most of the Asian games has more content in Line and Kakao Talk, and they are all in English. And they cannot find any content in WhatsApp, obviously, because like or Twitter, but WeChat, Line, and Kakao Talk has all these functions to get the information you need to pick up the game, or get to the advanced levels where you can understand what's going on if you level up too much, or like when you have to like tips and tricks and stuff like that. It's kind of very important. Another thing, this is also like very funny. Like I had a lot of experience with this in the East. When you plan an event, you have 4 or 5 steps to get the prize. Now, I mean, like you have to go there, pick the stuff, I mean, combine it with the material, get another thing, and make it a sword. Then level it up to like level 10, and then okay, you got the big prize. So when we tried to do this in the Western with the Western players, it was really like, I mean, people were deleting the game, or like they don't really participate in it. It was too complicated. On the other hand, this is like, it has to be very straightforward, like, and one step. I mean, I think like PUBG Mobile does it really well. I mean, like Fortnite does it really well. I mean, like you need to have just one thing to do. It can be hard, it can be easy, but you have to do it, and like it's over. It shouldn't be very complicated. And if we use this like simple method in the East, also like in Japan, they will not like it because they will ask for a more challenging and better prizes, which is a completely different structure. Again, this is like one of the important things, because like if you're trying to become a global game, you cannot celebrate St. Patrick's Day, which is very important in the Middle East. It can create, or like we don't have Christmas in the Middle East, so you cannot celebrate Christmas in your game in the Middle East. So it's better to have your HTML5 pop-ups be geographically available to different regions. Yeah. So the final part is the purchasing behavior, which is also like very different from East. In the East, when they see a new game coming in, they really try to spend the game as soon as possible, in the game as soon as possible, so they can catch up with the other players and go on. But in the West, we really need some time to understand that, okay, this is our game to play, so you need at least a couple of days to like really convince yourself that you can spend the games, because you're going to play it for a longer time. So these are like basic things, and VIP system is also as part of it. It's been available in Asia for a long while now, and we see more games implementing these VIP systems where you pay more, you get more bonuses, you get more advantages, and like more levels. I mean, some games has even like 20, 30 levels of VIP in their system, and it's becoming more and more available. I mean, more important in the West as well. Thank you for listening to me. I mean, I tried to list as much as possible in this 20 minutes. I hope it was useful. I mean, this is a long presentation, like supposed to be like maybe a couple of hours or a day long, because it never stops, and it always evolves with time. So
it's great. Aras, that was fantastic. I mean, actually, I was out. Facebook had me go out to Beijing just before Christmas, and I was talking to a lot of Chinese developers about how they would come to the West, and it's interesting. Kind of, there's some things in there, differences that I wish I knew when I was out there that you put in there about some of the culturalization. I think your point about things like female attractiveness and the differences between that and the subtleties. I think are really, really insightful, and that need to not just localize but culturalize, I think, is essential. One thing I did notice, though, that to me there was a big thing about gameplay design and socialization design, which I personally feel is a big piece. And it's interesting how when you were talking about how in events that you need that kind of like series of activities in Eastern markets, whereas you want that direct get on with it in the Western market. I think from a game design point of view, there's a lot, in my opinion, there's a little bit more surface with depth available in Asian games, whereas I think in games that are designed in the West, they're generally more sophisticated in overall, but there may be not so much variation once you get past that sophistication. Am I making sense, or is that different from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, like it's to be honest, like it's similar. Like I agree. Like it's part of the process, in my opinion. Like more and more, we see that Asian developers working really hard to be more appealing to West. But we don't see the opposite much. Like you see, whenever a game is becoming successful in the East by a West publisher or developer, we don't see much of a tweak. But everything is changed in Asian games. Like you see PUBG Mobile China versus PUBG Mobile Europe. I mean, like the Western build, it's so different. Like there are so many differences. They are really trying hard to make it appealing for us, to be honest.
Well, you mentioned PUBG. I mean, I was doing we had Pocket Game of Jordan last year, and I did some analysis and worked out that Saudi Arabia was the second largest source of revenue overall for PUBG Mobile.
Yeah.
And on average, the per population, about 5 times the revenue per user.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Like I mean, like it's also weird that only Asian companies like realize this and like focusing on those regions of the world. Like that's crazy. We should be in the West. We also should be like taking care of this. But like in our idea, of course, like USA is like for a European or Middle Eastern developer. We always try to go to USA, right? Like that's the biggest, that's closest to us. Yep. But again, like for Asia, it's like Middle East as well. Like they also like take care of it. It's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was at PlayStation, and it was basically US, UK, Europe, and Japan had its special place in Sony. Don't get me wrong, but in terms of revenue, that was the way we sliced things up. I better answer some of these questions. We've got quite a few of them racking up. So. From 2017, in the Korean charts, a lot of old-fashioned MMO games started turning up. Given the evolution of mobile gaming, is mobile going to become the kind of source of the main main area where MMOs might be played? Is MMO on mobile going to be as big as? I'm trying to summarize. It's quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So what does that mean in terms of is MMO on mobile a thing that's going to come into the West, or is it something which is really an Asian mindset?
Well, I think personally, I think that it's an Asian mindset. It will. I mean, I was one of the. I mean, when I was the CEO of Netmarble EMEA, we launched Lineage 2 Revolution, which is like a big IP and so on. But this complex 40 to 40, 100 to 100 MMO fights that's happening on mobile, it's still too much for Western people. Like, we don't like it. To be honest, we are used to like large screens. We are used to like play it on PlayStation and so on. It's kind of still too much for us.
But then when you see old school RuneScape, turning up on mobile, I mean, my feeling is it's a bit like mobile shooters.
Yeah.
We haven't culturally adapted yet, but it'll happen at some level.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Like, not now. I don't think it will happen in a year or so. Because now it's a time for Westerners to get used to survival games, like battleground games, to like get an idea of 40 versus 40. Like Fortnite does it, Roblox does it. We see them top of the charts, but we couldn't see MMORPGs cracking it up because it's very complicated to localize to West when you have an Asian IP, and like 90% of those IPs are in the East. They are making a lot of money already. Why would they like spend a lot of millions of man-hour to like localize it to West? We did it once in Netmarble.
Well, they take a massive part of the mind space of somebody. I mean, it's such a big burden, and I think for me, mobile experiences are bite-sized. So I suspect we'll see people using MMO like mechanics, but that are more determined around the incident level play rather than long session play.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Next question here is, what's the number one mistake you see Eastern developers making when trying to localize their games for the West?
Well, this. I did it plenty of times, so I'm very experienced on making mistakes.
I just want to say the classic phrase, "All your base are belong to us."
Yeah, exactly. Like, I spent 7 years in Asian companies, Netmarble, now Tencent. So I practically launched a lot of games, and most of them failed. So one of the major problems is that when you come to the localization, it's very difficult. I mean, how we don't understand them as a culture is a thing. It's same for them to let them understand what's happening with our culture. And it's not just about the words. I mean, like, words doesn't mean a thing when you localize. It's also important, but you need to have the characters, the styles, the words. It's all of a package. So one of the things that Eastern developers do is like just translating the game and like putting out in the market, especially in the marketing side, especially the user acquisition campaigns that they do. When they do it with just the translations using the same UA banner or the video they use in the Asia, they all fail, and they have like faced extreme user acquisition costs, and they like pick up and go. That's why big companies like Tencent or like NetEase, they do a good job to manage this user acquisition campaigns very locally with like local partners and so on.
Yeah, exactly. I think having that scale makes a huge difference. On that note, I have so many questions I want to ask you about the number one, the quirks, the Turkish market, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, time has escaped us. So Aras, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Oscar. It was a great pleasure. Take care for your time, everyone.
Take care, and hopefully see you soon.
Yeah.